Hello, welcome to this week. We're going to be talking about researching and narrowing your topic um, and just looking at the research that you have. So, this is a bit of a continuation of last week of the beginning research you're going to be needing to do. So, this is kind of step two. So, one of the first things you're going to want to do as you begin or continue research is you're going to want to need to find your specific topic. And sometimes finding a topic can be kind of like finding Waldo. If you look in this picture, I haven't found him in it yet, but I'm sure that Waldo is in this picture somewhere besides right down there, the bottom left-hand corner. But so if Waldo's in here, he's within the masses. So that's kind of what looking for a topic is like. You're looking at all this information and you're looking for that one specific thing. So when you are creating a topic or finding your topic, try to find something that you are interested in, something that you really like, or just like a little bit at least. You don't want to be so close to the topic that you don't know exactly what to say, and you don't want to be far enough away from it where you don't know anything about it. So be interested, something that you like, something you kind of know a little bit about. Your topic should be broad enough to be able to write what you need to write on it. Um, so you need to be specific in what you are doing, um, but it also needs to be narrow enough that it's not going to be super long for any sort of reason. So broad enough would be talking about an ant. Narrow enough would be talking about the ant's antenna and how they're used. Too narrow would be talking about the ant's front left leg, and way too broad would be talking about the front left leg of all insects. So think about your topics like that. Find the things that you're interested and something that's broad enough yet narrow enough to be able to write just the right amount of research paper on. You don't need to worry about that right now because we'll be looking at that later on. But let's move on. So I mentioned this last week. When you're gathering information, I want you to first focus on getting too much information. That's this picture of this coffee cup here. That's what this brought to me. It's overflowing. You want to get so much information that you're going to find that you're having enough points to make your overall argument, your overall point of your paper. So get too much information as you are starting out. And as you're working on that, I want you to find the interesting points in your paper, in your topic, I mean. You find the interesting points that are in different articles and just set them aside. And after you have a stack of however many articles you feel is enough, look for the redundancies within the articles. Sometimes you're going to find an article that is almost word for word from another article, and that's because, as I mentioned, I believe I mentioned this before, it kind of comes off the AP wire. So look for the redundancies and look for conflicting information. Sometimes, even though it might come off the AP wire, there's going to be a bias that might be added from the author, or there might be conflicting information because the information came at two different times. So if there was a storm that was coming through, and at one point it said that there's going to be no rain, it's just heavy wind, and then there was a change in the storm, and the storm now is all rain and no wind, you got to make sure that you're getting the information and it's all the same information. Make sure you don't have any conflicting information. If you do, then this too much information that you have gathered, you can discard that one and you wouldn't be you wouldn't be at a loss for information you're looking for. So after you have collected all these articles, books, magazine articles, websites, whatever, um, the next step is that you're going to want to read your articles. And you could do a quick read through them. You could do a slow read through them, just depending on how you gather the information, but read through them. And as you're reading, why not just use a highlighter or underline with a pencil or a pen um, the important tips, the important pieces of information, of research that you're going to want to use for your paper. Then I suggest you reread it, because sometimes when you're looking for information, you just see that information and you skip forward, so you're not looking at the context of it. So reread it and take notes. Maybe as you're working on each piece of information, you have a page or two, and you're taking notes somewhere so you can collect them, because the worst thing you're going to want to do is know that you have a piece of information, but you don't remember where it is. So you're going to have to reread all of your articles again. So if you find something important, make a note within the article or on a Word document or a piece of paper, however it works best for you. And then you can go through your notes later on, and you'll be able to find, excuse me, you'll be able to find the data that you need as you're writing later on. So after you have done all of this digging and collecting, you're going to need to narrow your information. You're going to need to look for the focus of it. So the focus of the topic, of the collection of research that you've done. So go through and look for the main points that are shared with everything. See if you can discover something new about it, something that maybe one article talks about, and you can then use that as a jumping off point for more research. And trim out the excess. If there's a lot of repeats with your data, then you probably don't have enough, so you can trim out that stuff. And I suggest you try to find a unique angle. Don't write the same paper that you've been writing for years. If you are like me, you like to redo some of the stuff that you have done before, because first off, it might be a little easier to start at a jumping off point that you've already been at before. But it also is, you've already done all the research. I suggest that, sure, you can use past research you've done, but you look for a unique angle. If you're going to write about something about fire safety or gun control or something like that, don't look at it from just the angle of that mainstream thought processes will come through. Don't look at the same angle that everybody's using. Look at a unique angle. Look at somewhere that not everybody has discussed. So, because that will make your paper stand out from the others. And I'm not saying that your paper needs to stand out from all the others for you to get a good grade. What I'm saying is that it will make your writing of the paper that much more enjoyable. So after you've collected and you've narrowed and you've done all this whittling down, you need to ask yourself some questions. Look at all of your research and think about what you want to say. What is it that's important to you in this? Is there anything that you personally can add to this from a personal anecdote, something that you went through? And is there something that you could change? For instance, if you were writing about rent-controlled apartments, is there something that you personally could change, or you would want to change to make some of the laws change in some of these things? So what can you personally change, and what can you learn from what you're going on? So ask yourself these questions, go through it, your research, and do what you can to find that unique angle and answer these questions. You might not need to answer these within your paper, but you need to answer these for yourself. So you are finding the information completely and putting it forth correctly in your paper and in your writing. Specifically, this week, you're going to be working on your annotated bibliography. your annotated bibliography is something you probably have not done before. And if you have done it, you might not have done it in this type of scale. But the annotated bibliography is something that can help you as you are doing research later in classes. This annotated bibliography will be something that you might have to revisit in future classes. It might be something that you can have in your back pocket as a tool as you're researching your work. So for this annotated bibliography, what I want you to do is select 2 of the many articles that you found. I want you to take note as you are reading them. Read a few times, make notes, have that notebook handy. Then I want you to summarize what the article is about. And then after you've done a summary, I want you to do a response or an analysis of the article. Your annotated bibliography will also contain the citation, either an MLA or APA. It will contain a summary paragraph and an analysis paragraph. Each annotated bibliography entry is about a page. It's definitely not going to be 2 pages, and you're not going to want to do a whole lot. It's going to need to be more than half a page also. So make sure you have those 3 things: a citation, a summary paragraph, and an analysis paragraph. So we looked at the citations last week, and you can find those forms that are provided for you within the course. You find those in last week's coursework. So let's look at what the summary is going to be. So with your summary, you're going to want to have the author's full name. And this is a side note: when you are writing a paper, you should not call the author by the first name. You don't have to call them Mr. Smith or Mrs. Smith, but you need to, or Dr. Smith, but you need to call them by their full name. And you don't ever want to use the author's first name in your writing unless it is somebody that you know. And you have to know them specifically and personally. It's not somebody that you are familiar with. Like I read a lot by a few different authors, and let's say Stephen King is one of the authors that I read a lot of. I would not write a paper and talk about what Steve does. I would talk about what Mr. King does, because I don't know Steve King. I don't know Stephen King. I just know his writing. So anyway, so you want the author's full name. This is going to be for later as you're working on this stuff. You're going to want to have the full title of the article. That includes the colons, the commas, all that stuff. If it's 50-word long title, that's too long, first off. But if it is 50-word title, you want to write down all 50 words. Talk about the author's credentials. Do they have a PhD, MBA? What is important about them that you as the reader should feel this source is trustworthy, or this author is trustworthy? Then write down what you think the thesis of the paper is, or the article is. And then what is the overall main idea, or the main ideas that are slipped in throughout the whole paper? What is the author trying to convey? Then what are the subpoints? What are things that you could dig into deeper, or they're not fully fleshed out, but they are still in the paper and they are important? And then what conclusions did this author come from? So this is what the summary looks like. And I'm sure that you shouldn't have any problems with writing a paragraph per paper or per article based on just the summary. So the next part of it is the response or the analysis. And this is where you're going to ask yourself some more questions. First, what is the writer trying to say? This is just what you think the author, their goal was in it. And then ask yourself, was this grasped? Was this something that I personally understood as the main point? So, just because somebody is writing about something doesn't mean that they are fully grasping the topic at hand. Next, you want to ask, what kind of supporting information is there? This is within the paper. Did they back it up with sources? Did they back it up with just anecdotes? Did they use any logical fallacies? What kind of support is there for the response to the analysis? If it was a persuasion, did the author persuade you in their topic? Have you changed your mind, or did they just give you some ideas about how to think about this topic? Ask yourself, is there anything specific that you want to note about it? Is there anything important that has come out from this reading, something that you want to look out for later on in your further research, something that you might need to watch out for? Meaning, like, stay away from a certain side of the argument because it's not going to get you anywhere. There's not enough information. Or maybe in the author's paper, the author's article, they have said a lot of information. And they said, this is where I get most of my information from. Maybe that's something you want to note down as well. You also want to see if there is any need for improvement. So is there more information that you personally will need from either this author or from a different source? Or is there a need for improvement in this person's research? Do you feel like they might need to do a little bit more digging? And if so, maybe you want to discard that article or just use it not as heavily as some of the other sources. You also want to say, is this really helpful to me? Because just because you've read an article, just because it might be on the topic that you're writing about, just because it has all the information you need, it could be extra and it could be not helpful for your writing at all. So you might want to discard it just based on that. But ask yourself, is this information helpful for you as you're writing? Then what is important is how and where do you plan to use this source in your paper? Is this going to be a first source that you're going to point to, one of the secondaries, one that you're going to try to mention in passing? But the key here is that it's a plan. Just because you've done all this research, you've done your annotated bibliography, you've done your summary and your response, your analysis, that doesn't mean that you have to use this. This is just a plan. This is your starting off point. So you can change your topic if you find that you're writing and it's just not working, or you're finding that you want to go in a different direction. You can change, because this is just a plan. This is just a beginning.